you can be their father. I'm saying about young girls in their 20s who might adulate you, but you don't have to pay the price of being their father. So you have to give your head a shake and say, hey, I'm not her father, and I never will be. And you should commend them to their father, whether they be passed away or gone into Afghanistan, right? Think to yourself, would their father be happy about what's going on between you and this young woman? And from a male perspective, you're going to wake up in the middle of a hormonal estrogen-riddled soup by just going to coffee every day, and you don't even realize it. Because the young girl herself is putting on a lot of hormones, and your body is responding, whether you know it or not. So human females can have a kind of tractor beam. They can pick what guy they like. Right? This is something that people don't understand. It's been studied in bonobo apes. And there's strong theories in the anthropological world that human beings became very different. Not because they tried marijuana or special mushrooms or UFOs came down, but because women took more control of how they chose their mates. Right? And this is something that for some reason is not really vaunted in academia or gender studies schools. And maybe it's dangerous information, right? But women, not always, of course. There's lots of male predators out there. But women, and they don't have total command of this language, but women have an apparatus that tends to want, whether it's for their own good or not, to reach out and grab, chemically or hormonally grab men and grab their attention. That's why you have a cosmetic industry, right? It's why women fixate upon shoes. It's not just to attract men, obviously, but it's like they get all these compulsions because they almost don't have enough to do with their energy. So much of their life is about navigating this very difficult, very volatile world of hormones, right? Which is also like how they've learned to attract a mate, how they've learned to or how they've endured the types of behavior that they didn't know their hormones were helping to procure among men who had been educated or abused in their way to respond. So it's a kind of a hormonal codependent relationship. Everyone's kind of playing a role. The men are like, I don't know, I liked you, so I jumped on you. Right? You know, I liked you too, but you don't have to jump on me. So a woman gives out enough signals, boom, she hooks her man, and then he just starts slowly reeling him in. What I'm saying is that women can be the fishermen of men. They are the fishers of men. And the fish has to do with the vagina. The vagina is the fishers of men. When the military world wants to get men to go to war, right, they use a mother's womb to train them and to teach them. They use an understanding of the natural bond of these little boys with their mothers to begin exposing them and subjecting them to deprivation therapy. So the school systems prior to World War I were all based on the deprivation therapy applied to young boys, at the behest as though of their mother and of the state and of those who spoke as though the laws of human flesh and blood and what it was supposed to do, and what about its responses were acceptable and which ones were not. It's training, as though out of the mother's womb, as though you were born for nothing else. Imagine a man came up to you and he said, took you away and put you in a crate because he looked at you and he saw food for monkeys, or he saw someone to be raped by a gang of hungry bikers, and that's all you were good to him for. So the world grabbed them and said, you're going to be a soldier. Your mother's womb told us that. It's your destiny. It's part of nature. When you kill, hundreds of billions of people, that's just an act of God, right? So, and you don't know how these people think. You don't know how they groom children, because that's above your pay grade. Your rank in society, as much as your brain, only works according to your rank, right? Pocket's cold down here. So people live in these they grow up in these schools and these hormonal soups. You have in every story, in every narrative, there's some sort of gender-neutral witch to help signify the arrest or the paralysis or the paroxysm of the core levels of judgment and of the organization of parts of the brain in judgment, and a level higher and more important than the organization of the various branches of all the militaries in the world in getting the next great threat to your way of life, and arresting that part of the brain and inserting dynamics related to someone impersonating your father, right? And a scapegoat who can survive all kinds of threats to the brain by, instead of actually dying, becoming someone else, becoming the hero. The hero becomes someone else, and then eventually completely dies when the sun sets, which means death, the death of Horus. So every hour of the day, you strut upon the stage as the hero, as a new person who has survived something that might have killed someone else, as though one of those passengers who's a ghost after a plane crash, but you don't really know it. And it's a jarring feeling like you haven't really been yourself since you were born, or since something grabbed you, exposed you to deprivation therapy, or your mother put you in daycare for the first time. And the women there, as wonderful as everyone thinks they are, if you really examine them, don't give a fuck about children at all. It's been trained out of them how to give a fuck about children, because man's identity from being a child to anything else is taught in a completely perverted way by every school of thought in the world, continually interpolating the grip that society wants to assert upon your flesh and blood as though before your parents themselves were born, right? And that produces an alcoholic world, a world where every group is joined by people who are looking to enhance their denial, and they find intoxicating way of life by linking up with other types of people, other types of economic gambits and strategies and coping systems to magnify the chemical laboratory that already began to start to be erected in your mind as it started to be subjected to the world, and enhancing certain electrochemical profiles that in turn will be useful or not, depending on what role you decide to play or get forced into in the world, and relying upon nothing else, at least how much money you can make with the type of sacrifice you're really making. If anything else you might have been, unless you would have been pre-imagined to be one of the millions of workers who live and die and leave fulfilled children to collect whatever your corpses have left for them to split up amongst themselves. Because mommy and daddy left the building a long time ago, right? Mommy and daddy whom you would never want to go away, but don't want to think about an abstract concept of how they kind of went away before they died. Because maybe a part of them went away when they were a child, and something else replaced that. And no one really noticed the difference, because no one was really noticing who they were to begin with. And that's why they had to leave. It was like they weren't even there. So they weren't there anymore, and somebody else replaced them, and they become young schizophrenics, right? Playing certain roles. You notice that the children in your classes, who are the jokers and the pranksters, right? They're always the best actors. They're always the most fucked up, right? Because in an environment as artificial as a school, they've learned to have fun. And that's one of the most dangerous things that can happen to someone, to start to be comfortable with the chains around your mind. And you start to wear them like the latest fashion. And so you see people coming out of schools of thought, and their education is like their costume. Their therapists are narcissistic sociopaths, but they've got this beautiful costume they wear, this raiment, as they raise their staff and project all kinds of unmet needs into your blood and into your body, and begin to fill you up with purulent slogans and feigned difference and feigned interest in your fucked up life. And then you pay them for it. And the only people who have successes with this become sociopaths themselves. Every sexual predator I've ever met has had a therapist whom they admire to no end, because they, quote, were like friends. Right? The whole point of life coaching is to produce more life coaches, which is just giving sociopaths something to do at a kind of vanilla level. Right? There's this one life coach called Michaela Chung, and she made a few videos about being an introvert, had a few Facebook Lives, things like that. And then you see this video where she's on a stage being what looks like a pretty good stand-up comedian. So I think her idea of introvert and my idea of introvert are two very different things. So in her world, whatever this introvert thing is, needs to be counteracted by doing the most socially fearful thing for anyone who's inward and careful and cautious to ever do or even contemplate doing. And yet there's nothing in her videos that explains this extraordinary stretch of her capacity to claim to be an introvert and then to be able to go on stage like she's been doing it her whole life. Talk about her race, talk about her sex, her hips, her sex life. It's pretty interesting. Putting on a real facade. So the word introvert doesn't mean anything, really. Okay, and the word empath doesn't mean anything. You might as well be a Pisces or an Aries. You know, are you an extrovert, introvert, Pisces or Aries? I'm an introverted Pisces with a snow cone up his ass. It doesn't mean anything. It's just words, just sounds they make. You attribute the meaning. You're like, there's something about me that could be an introverted empath. Maybe I can get a superpower like her and fly onto the stage. What's the name of your superpower, Michaela-chan? Well, it's about being fake and presenting certain images to people, even though whatever I'm saying is completely ungrounded and not anything to do with what's happened in my true life. And that's what solves all our problems. I can't tell you that though. You have to just kind of pick it up with your own brain chemistry because you really like listening to me. I seem to have everything figured out. And when you talk to people and make them feel that way, you're actually really helping them. And sociopaths really like to help people. So why don't you do that with me? Let's do it together. Helping the world by being fake. Showing people the power of filling up their minds. Like a lake of need that we project our own. Then like cancer we come out of their bone. Because they're you're about to be a new person, You can talk to anyone, because you're a person who's no longer shy. You get on the stage, you put on the costume, and you say your lines. And everywhere the people start to smile. My son or daughter's there, they are beyond compare. Losing inhibitions is divine. The next time you're gonna feel as good as being on stage is when you're dead. It's amazing what happens when you lose all the problems of your lower chakras. It's like heroin. Yay! My most non-neurotic time in my life, from 0 to 25, was wearing a Frankenstein monster's mask to school. And it's interesting, there are females who chose to talk to me, right? And what it enticed out of them for the one and only time in my life. Flirting with someone whose face they couldn't even see. It's fascinating. And it was the day after I had an out-of-body experience. All my neuroses was gone. Isn't it fascinating? Hey? So in a sense, to be an actor is to die and be born again. What does that sound like? It sounds like Jesus. Jesus helps you become an actor, but he also vouchsafes the necessity for torture and the conditions that make it inevitable, because let's face it, God can't do everything until you're dead. And then you won't care anymore. It's a really deadly way of thinking, but the theater and Christianity are totally connected. They follow the same purpose. It's the same thing. Same thing as a narcissistic sociopath. Same thing as therapy. Same thing as your favorite music. Same thing as the belief in Greece and Rome and the pyramids and UFOs. The same thing as the moon landing, the cures for cancer, and the run for the cure. Everything, all the actors, all the messages, all the anthropology, all geared, all outer space, all science fiction to a memorial to the human voice. Keep you in prison in a language of death. In fact, the word language itself means death. Languish, anguish, and ange, torture and death. The Bible is tortor. It's torture. The T is the bull of Ella's vision, the bull of Ella's sacrifice. Everything that's for your convenience is to keep up the language of sacrifice and mortification of human flesh on the cross of time and of the year, and of all the epiphanic poetry of birth after birth of the spring of man and of the Son of Man. Constantly putting a pall over the sun, Apollo, right? So we have been without sun for weeks, right? They are covering up the sun every day, right? Keeping it cold and dark every day. Right? Cold and dark every day. Right? It's cold. And no sun, just a constant gray cloud. Day after day after day. Just locked in, sucked in. And when you do see a break, you usually see chemtrails. And I'm feeling it. I feel it every year. It's a long march of death. And once the day gets around 12 o'clock, it tends to warm up a little bit, depending on where I'm at. Some food. Stone. My second doesn't take much marijuana. This stuff is pretty strong. I'm gonna get to the forest. Let's take breaks. Trying to just keep enjoying my life some days. On my home, relax. Yeah, she's turned. I don't know. You see, the thing is, like, my sister's a predator, and it could seem like my mom has kind of turned her into a predator, but Lindsay gets turned into a predator with me too, and it probably looks like I'm turning her into a predator. My sister forms upon my mother and me with what amounts to predatory instincts, but she doesn't think about herself that way. Her entire profession really is about preying on people, but she doesn't think about that, preying on their vulnerabilities, claiming to have all the answers. Do you feel sensitive? Especially for young girls. Right? It's basically, she's created her own religion out of a degree in education. And she's gotten a book or two published. She's appeared on television. She's been paid to speak to families and children about connecting. It sounds really good. But when you see how my mom and her talk and how she treats my mother, it's quite a different story. The level of passive aggression is off the charts. Because if the only relation they can have is about her trying to fix my mother's life, that's not a relationship. I'm like, Mom, when you're on the phone with her, do you know that she does all of the talking? Did she ever find out about your life, your days, what book you're reading, anything interesting? Did she ever show you how to improve little parts of your life just by offering the kinds of suggestions that you might to someone you love? Like a book to read or maybe something like that, or subtle, respectful. But no, she's intent upon overhauling my mom's entire life. Right? She's at one point offered to buy her a house, but quote, she would have to work for it. She's 74 years old. What does she mean by that? So, does she mean that as a teacher she would demand certain goal-setting activities to earn the kind of trust that would favor her with a new house for free? Or is it because she just wants to control my mom, and it was something just to throw at her to see how she'd respond? To see if she could exert even more control over her, and she tried and it didn't work. So she didn't get the control she wanted, so she went back and tried something else. And she's constantly trying to control her, but she would probably say she's trying to help her. And when my mom tells her too much personal information, she's let my sister know way too much about her life and about me. It just gives fuel to the fire. Because my sister only sees things the way she wants to, right? In the worst possible way, which defeat her ability to get what she wants from her mother or me, and gives her nothing but one kind of thing to do with what's left of how she imagines she thinks of us as real people. She's a living, breathing cult. She's a narcissistic sociopath. So, needless to say, I don't want anything to do with her, but she never goes away. She's like a parasite. But it's on a low hum now, because she's got my mom to meet her in Victoria. They've made about a dozen different plans to meet. over the last 2 or 3 years, and they never do. Okay? It happens all the time. It never happens. I'm not quite sure what that means. Right? But my mom is exerting a certain number of boundaries, which is kind of... But the moment my mom became weakened, mentally, emotionally anyway, my sister could get her hooks into her. It's one of those families. My sister sees it as her job to get hooks into her. She sees it as part of her job. She's accepted it as part of her purpose in life. And my mom has basically led her to want to do that. And nothing but that. My mom has trained her to do that as much as she trained her as a young daughter and left her with an inappropriate father. She trained her to be a narcissistic sociopath. If my mom thinks she deserves to be treated that way, then she will. And it'll be up to me to decide who's the sick one, my mom or my sister. Right? So, and I don't want to be around that. I want to make that go away. So, there's a lot of crazy people out there, but you don't want them having too much influence over one another. It is bitter. The ocean and the mist is also a thing. I've been walking straight for a while. It doesn't seem to help. At least I can walk where I need to now. And guess where I need to go. Off of Women's House. So it's come to my attention that in ways now my sister has kept up such a concussion of forceful interactions with my mother that I think my mother doesn't realize she's keeping her up, but she paralyzes her. My mother gets off the phone, it's like she's been drinking. She basically arrests and paralyzes certain parts of my mother's mind. Can you imagine what she does to little girls? She just paralyzes you with her assertive, positive energy. Right? She's had the control over vulnerable children for her entire career, and she makes money out of it, like a therapist. Right? I think she considers herself a child psychologist. Right? And yet my sister has never had any competent help with her own compulsions, eating problems, violent relationships with my father, with me, obsessive compulsive disorders. The only way she can be with the guy she's at is because he's worse than she is. And you wonder if the world made any other kinds of people sometimes. And my mom deserves the best people in her life. She deserves better than my sister. If my sister were to get hit by a train tomorrow, I'd wish her well, but I would say my mom would be better off there. And that's just the way it is. She's a parasitical human being who thinks she's a completely righteous human being who can never be wrong. If my mom objects to the way she's being spoken to, my sister never allows her to, without saying something like deflecting and saying, don't make this about me, this is about you. So this person that she's helping is the only one who can have the problem. You ever known someone like that? That's a sexual predator. And you're the one with that problem. It's related to alcoholism. It's also sexually predatory. So essentially, she's sexually preying on her mother. Right? She drains her energy. She sets her up for unremittingly aggressive contact. And my mom is slowly relieved of any surviving compulsion that she thinks is worth using to vocalize any objection to the way she's being spoken to. And the enormous time my sister takes and calls her when she knows I'm home and takes up her time for an hour or so, exerting her territorial space, right? Because she teaches young girls who are sensitive not to be too sensitive, to take charge, to help the world make it a better place, right? Does that sound, that was always the best thing to teach a child to do, right? But that's what she does. does, and that's what people pay her to do. And she's made her retirement worth of money out of it. She's made thousands of dollars, right? Talk about a deal with the devil. She's a teacher, right? These are the kind of people who appear on television and write books about connecting with your children. So what do they really mean when you read between the lines? Okay, so I'd rather deal with a little evil every day than deal with it all at once. If I know what my sister is, I could hardly blame my mother for being duped by her if I didn't educate myself. Aside from the fact that she's my mom's daughter and my sister, what would you say is true about this person? Right? They're one of the parasitical forces in my life. I will only ever say positive things about her to my mom. Sometimes I tell her, she does have a mental disease, And my mom sometimes can acquiesce, especially she can tell my sister is a little weird. And she doesn't talk to really any of her family. So she has such a strong sense of professional identity around telling people what to do and how to live their lives that she basically doesn't know how to be any other kind of person. She's not really a woman anymore. She's a robot. She's an android. And her sociopathy just sort of spreads her purpose-driven life into every vacuole available to her that she has any reason to profit from, or to benefit from, or to stave off any threat from. And my mom, to her, is a burden. And I, to her, am nothing but a burden. And she just wants to deal with us. She wants to decide where my mom lives. She wants to get rid of me. And why would someone want to get rid of my mom's closest family member, who's lived with her for several years and many years, and has been very helpful to my mom in many ways, right? And that's one thing that I've lived with West Fine. It's she wants to get rid of me out of her life. This is someone who's exerted exactly the same kind of influence on every home I've been in, and has agitated my mom enough to become violent to me at times. I've become sick just being in the same room when my mom is talking to my sister. I'm physically ill. So this is a very sick human being. So I do ceremonies in the sense that I talk about it. I have no one to talk about it with. I've protected myself a bit, but every day I have to go into my own sort of suspension and disbelief and say, look, I guess we're okay for now. I live day by day because my sister really drains a lot of, I have to work hard to have a silent home and be able to talk to my mom, friendly interactions, but she really turns my mom's voice off. She turns my mom away from me. She poisons her mind. She poisons her blood. She likes to emphasize the idea that I'm nothing but a burden to my mother, which is absolutely slanderous to our home. She exploits my mother's deferential behavior and solicitude, and she tends to finish talking to my sister in a state of mind that's apt to protect her from all reasonable scrutiny, almost especially because of the negative effect she has upon her, in a way that makes it perfectly clear that that effect is extraordinarily negative. It's getting a bit warmer to enter the park. We go into the forest like we did yesterday and walk a bit and come back here. Yes. Let's see if we can. Yeah, I don't have anyone to talk to. My mom, clearly isn't all on my side with this. She just thinks that, like, the relationship she's having with Lindsay, difficulties are not coincide. I tried to tell her, she's a good person in many ways, but she does have a disease. And she's focusing it on you. Understand? You have to dissuade her from that. You have to set her off that trail a little bit. My mom does, by basically she removes herself from my sister. She becomes aloof. And then my sister gets angry. And she batters my mom with silence or missiles and freezes her out. And then they start again. Once my mom capitulates to being the wrong one, then my sister starts again, climbing that mountain. And they never tried to give my mom observations about the negative pattern between them. It just goes on and on and on. I think it just wears them both down. It's all they can do. It's the only dance they can dance. It's the only song they're listening to. And nothing else can get into it. She's on the warpath, you see. And nothing can stop her. Nothing can stop her because her life, goal-driven, purposeful life is about stalking my mother and me. And when someone's life and everything they are in life are predicated on doing something that gives off such a disturbing resonance to you and your mother, what do you do about it? Right? It hasn't done anything illegal, right? So I use magic to protect my own life. I light incense. In fact, I got an incense stick from like a Peruvian forest, and I light that some days, feather it, and it kind of helps clean the energy. Because one of the worst things about it, if it helps, is just the energy that's set up, the sort of the dis-ease that's set up. If you can just get rid of some of that, and the unseemly connotations, stresses, somebody using that much aggressive energy under a very positive pretext of helping people, and just what she's teaching her female children, students, to do in life. What I've noticed about the local population of females, males also, but females in a very particular way, is that you have to understand, if you live in parts of Vancouver Island, all over the place, is that they're overly aggressive. They're excessively aggressive. Girls, young girls of all ages, people especially who have grown up on the West Coast, are extremely aggressive people, extremely sexually aggressive, aggressive in every way. Expect to see very aggressive people. This is who they are. And my sister is a prime example. I get all kinds of little bits of aggression when I even use public services or, community places. It's just as always these young white females. They just give you a little snap. If they don't serve you, they're teaching you how to be around them.